A very good evening. It's great to see so many people here this evening, and a lot of new faces that I've never seen in the Kunsthistorisches Museum before, so thank you. There's a lot going on in Vienna this week, so I am very grateful to all of you for making the time to join us. As many of you know by now, every couple of months the Kunsthistorisches Museum invites a remarkable person from the world of modern and contemporary art. An artist, a collector, a dealer, an auctioneer, a museum director, to come to Vienna, spend a few days with us at the museum and talk about their work and their profession in the context of 6,000 years of objects and collecting and patronage. For the fifth and final talk this year, we have an early Christmas present for you all. Not just one remarkable person, but two remarkable people, Roberta Smith and Jerry Saltz. That was supposed to come later, but a few words of introduction. Roberta Smith has written for the New York Times since 1986, coming up to 30 years, and is today their co-chief art critic, the first woman in the history of the newspaper to have held that position. She also writes about art, design, architecture, and the decorative arts for many other publications, including Art Forum, Art in America, and The Village Voice. She's previously worked at the Whitney Museum of American Art, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and the Paula Cooper Gallery. She lectures and teaches regularly and has written essays for catalogues and monographs on contemporary artists, including Cy Twombly, Elizabeth Murray, and Alex Katz. And she contributed the lead essay to the catalogue raisonné of Donald Judd's work that was published by the National Gallery of Canada in 1975. In 2000, the year I was born, actually, sorry, I don't know who that offended more, actually, but probably me. Okay. In 2003, she was awarded the Frank Jewett Mather Award for Art Criticism by the College Art Association, and she has appeared several times on Art Review magazine's guide to the 100 most powerful figures in the contemporary art world, whatever that might mean. Jerry Saltz, her husband for more than 20 years, is the senior art critic for New York Magazine. He was formerly senior art critic for The Village Voice, which is where many of us first encountered his candid and wonderfully irreverent voice. He's been nominated for the Pulitzer Prize in Criticism on no less than 3 separate occasions, and has served as a visiting critic at the School of Visual Arts, Columbia University, Yale University, the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and the New York Studio Residency Program. The perfect gentleman, Jerry waited until 2007, 4 years after Roberta, to win the Frank Jewett Mather Award for Art Criticism himself. He's written 2 books, Seeing Out Loud, published in 2003, a collection of his Village Voice columns, and Seeing Out Louder in 2009. He is as well known for his print writing as he is for his wholehearted embrace of new media as a means to connect audiences to art. His Facebook page is followed by hundreds of thousands of people and has developed into a very real platform for public debate on contemporary art. And this is the point where I wanted to say, please put your hands together and give a very warm Viennese welcome for Roberta Smith and Jerry Saltz. We like to make people feel doubly welcome here. The history of art criticism is as ancient as the history of art itself. From the caves of Lascaux to ancient Greece and ancient Rome, art has been discussed, talked about, celebrated, and fought over for thousands of years. Today, there are many different parallel art worlds, and with them, there are many different parallel worlds of art criticism. And, as we're told repeatedly, every single one of them is in crisis. The field of criticism that we will be primarily discussing this evening is the field in which Roberta and Jerry are primarily engaged, and which many of us here this evening are most familiar with. That is to say, print magazine, newspaper, and online criticism, which is intended to reach as broad an audience as possible, from the expert to the person with only a passing interest in cultural goings-on. So we're going to start right at the beginning. You need your microphones. Do you have your microphones? Okay, you have your microphones. Roberta, you were born in New York, but you were raised in Kansas and you studied in Iowa. Jerry, you were raised in the Chicago suburbs and you arrived here via a career as a long-distance truck driver. How did this happen for you both, briefly? How did you find your way into this?
I was brought up by somebody who was very interested in art, my mother, and was always kind of interested in it. And
I think that's your mother, maybe. Yeah.
Mom. And also, I mean, this is kind of corny, but my mother redecorated her house at a fairly good clip, and I was her only daughter, and I was constantly pressed into service as a kind of sounding board. And I was really, my opinions were solicited and taken seriously. And I think that I just grew up with an idea that you have opinions about things, and you would look at things and think about, a vase or a swatch of fabric or a paint chip or a piece of furniture. You look at things and you talk about how you react to them. And the other thing was that I also, when I was in the independent study program, which is how I got from Iowa back to New York, I did a paper on Donald Judd, and Judd had been a critic, and Judd was an extremely opinionated person, and his whole environment had sort of been scrutinized and subject to incredible visual standards that you could, when you walked in and saw the things he lived with, forget his art, forget the art that he owned, when you just saw what he had around him, you sensed this scrutiny. And you sense this idea of, yes, everything can have, have average, good, or outstanding levels. Everything can be really good, everything can be strong. And this made a very formative impression.
And were you writing, when you were at the gallery, when you were with the modern, you began to write?
Well, working at the Modern was my first job. I was a secretary. But I did gradually get this idea that writing was something that I could do, and I had at a certain point kind of just absorbed Judd's writing. So I kind of was like a mini Judd. It was a great place to begin because he had this very compressed economical style, and he always had an opinion. And, criticism just seemed like something that I could do that could be my work, and, I didn't want to work in a museum. I realized I didn't want to put my energy into an institution.
Did you ever make art yourself?
Not much. Really,
No.
I always knew that it was just kind of therapeutic. It was mindless as opposed to something more mindful. And I realized that artists were not mindless. They trusted their intuition and things like that, but it was a completely different level of activity.
And Jerry, you came in more through art making.
I came into criticism lucky, like all of you came into what you do. I feel that way every day. And first of all, I want to thank Jasper Sharp and Sabina Haag for inviting us to incredible Vienna. We are very jealous and we hate you very much. And I know the city gets messed up the way every other city gets messed up, but for us it's incredibly magical and beyond belief to have been allowed to be here in one of the gardens of Eden, of a thing that we invented at the beginning of being us, called making art. And art has been here since the beginning, and we'll get around to that. I got around to this because, like a lot of you, I'm not qualified to do anything else. I always think I'm not even qualified to do this. Do you think that? I think that, like, the president thinks that. Like, how did I end up here? And it's by luck and by desperation. And I was not good with women, so I noticed that the women who would go out with boys were going out with boys in the theater world, and they seemed different to me, and then, or the art world. So I thought, I've got to be in the art world. And it didn't work. And I wanted to be an artist, and I tried for a little while, did not make very good art. How many people here began whatever they're doing now as artists?
There's a lot of liars in the room.
Okay, and how many artists are in the room? A lot of you. God help you. I mean, God bless you. And I did not know how to get into the art world. I did not know what to do. So I thought, well, criticism must be easy, and it might be a great way to be popular and to meet women and stay up late and be in the art world. And so I became a long-distance truck driver. The only Jewish one, I think, in the world. And I used to try to go on to the radio and talk about Karl Andre, but it didn't go over very well. So I taught myself to be an art critic in the trucks by reading a magazine we call Art Forum. Do you ever read this thing? Well, I still try to read it, but I never quite understand it. So I thought I better learn to write exactly like that, because that seemed to be the way to go about your business. And I tried and failed. And one thing led to another, and so I just, one day, when people would say, "What do you do?" I did what everybody in this room has to do one day. So if you ask me, "What do you do?" I would say, "I'm an art critic." And in New York, it was kind of great, so they would go, "Oh, great, that's good." And I'd walk away thinking, "Fantastic, I am an art critic." And I had to write. Have any of you here ever tried to write? It's the worst thing on earth. No, I know, it's good too. But it's like sent by a demon from hell through heaven. So I started to write. And I just want to tell you something. Jasper, can I say your age?
Sure, I did already.
Yeah, he's 40 years old. I want you to know, for any people that are worried in this room, and then I'll be done, is I did not start writing until I was his age. So I'm a really grateful, really desperate late bloomer. That I spend all day thinking how lucky I feel that I'm in the art world. Even when I complain all day about the art world, I just think there's no other this is an all-volunteer army, and I volunteer. So that's how I got started. I'm not good at conversation.
I'm going to leave the stage in about 5 minutes. Yeah, this is fantastic. I've got a lot of questions here, but we're. I'm going to prefix every question by saying, briefly. No, I'm only kidding.
If it's that long,
I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding. No, it's great. I want more. Can you? I think everyone would be kind of intrigued to know more about your working processes. You visit a lot of exhibitions, a lot of studios. I'm curious about how much reading and preparation you do before you go to them. I'm curious whether you see them together. I'm curious after you've seen a show whether you talk about it, because you're often both reviewing the same thing. How is that? How do you cook what you cook?
Well, it's kind of complicated.
She's mad at me a lot. No, just kidding.
It's very strange to kind of do your work and have a mirror and especially when your work is art criticism, because there aren't really a lot of people that do it. There aren't a lot of people who get to do it for a living. We're both incredibly privileged in that regard. And I was really, ready for a kind of uncomfortable, desperate life. Desperate's a good word, a lonely life. Because writing art criticism is really lonely. And it's just amazing to have somebody right beside me doing the same thing, who absolutely every complaint, every pleasure I have has a kind of complementary reality with him. And, deadlines or editors who savage something you've written, or, all these experiences are just, we have a little matching punch lists. And we talk about art all the time. We look at it together. We look at it apart. We have completely different processes. Jerry will go and look at the Picasso show for 45 minutes, and I'll go 3 times for a couple of hours each time and write down every object in the show. And, he'll write what I think is an amazing review, and then I kind of grind my teeth.
And is there... It happens often that you review the same thing.
Yeah, we try to avoid it, but when you get big museum, we try to avoid it on gallery shows. But when you get big museum shows, we're both sort of on assignment. And that you don't really talk to each other about the show. We have a kind of protocol, right?
Absolutely. Honestly, I'm terrified to hear any thought Roberta has, because I'm in awe of her work. I'm also scared to hear anybody's thought about a show, because whenever I hear any thought about anything, I think, that's a pretty good idea. That's not too bad. Maybe I could use that. So we see about 25 or 30 shows every week in New York. Gallery shows in New York City. There's an advantage in New York in that there are a zillion galleries. Of course, 85% of the shows are crap, but 85% of the art made in the Renaissance was probably crap. I'm serious if you think about this. And so we go out, we walk around the galleries, and we have very little life other than what you just heard. And I'm not ashamed, and I love my life. We go to galleries, we pretend we're going to go to the party, we never go to the dinner, and then we're home by 10 o'clock writing every night, at night, after having written all day. You're out having a cigarette, we're doing nothing.
So this was actually my next question. Since you began writing, the art world has broadened exponentially, and the terrain that you're expected to be familiar with is vastly expanded since you began, in terms of the number of galleries, the number of artists, the internationalism that you're expected to sort of be au fait with a much broader palette of things. How do you maintain relationships and friendships with artists and curators and gallerists and museum directors? How do you manage the whole circus that now accompanies contemporary art, of dinners and parties and galas and so on? And how necessary is the distance from that, and how necessary is it to have a proximity to it, to sort of...
Well, I think you have to understand that we work in these kind of little capsules, that we're under kind of constant pressure. Like, the New York Times will take as much writing as you can produce and ask you for more. And you might get, a breaking news story, or you might have a death of an artist for which there is not an advanced obituary at the paper. So you can be completely insulated in your work in a way that's both good and bad. But the thing is that you have to keep going. That's what's so interesting about newspaper journalism is you have a finite amount of time, you have a finite amount of space, and what you're doing is just trying to get an idea or two out that your reader can work with, that you can give your reader something to work with that will get them in front of the art and allow them a kind of entry so they can have their own experience, have their own opinions, start having their own conversation with art, which is really what I think my job is. My job is to get people out of the house. So I don't worry about knowing everything. I know a lot because I've been in the art world since 1972. And everybody who's looking at art is building up like an image bank, a library of experiences of things you've seen, and every next thing you look at is sort of seen against this accumulation. And that's, and opposed to a collector or a curator, what I do is convert that into a form of writing. You know, I try to get that on paper in some way. You try to get that into a show in some way, that kind of accumulating experience, kind of the idea that we're all involved in this kind of life of self-education that comes from art, and that we're all, I think that what keeps you sane is that we're all involved, if we're lucky, with trying to give back in some way. That if you have a connection to art, which is one of the greatest things to have, then you have a kind of obligation to try to help get that connection out to other people. So, I don't know where I'm going with this, but anyway. You want to go?
How I write is as hard as I can all the time. I have bad news for writers, museum directors, art historians, curators. Weekly critics are on such deadlines that we have no time to read your beautiful essays that are beautiful, that took forever to write, and you love them. But I sort of read the first paragraph and I'm very excited, and then I look at my watch and I go, holy heck, I have to get to work, I have to drill into myself and deliver up what experience I had. And it's really important to me to do that. You asked what our life is like. Because of the life that Roberta described, we are very isolated. It doesn't seem that way, I know. I found a way away from the isolation. I created a character called Jerry Saltz. He lives a second self, my second self. Any of you follow him on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram? Start. There's good naughty pictures, if nothing else. I post a lot of medieval pornography, of images that have been forgotten and left behind, and digital photography is just allowing us, well, I just saw that. And so I found that between writing, Jasper, that while Roberta's working and I'm working, I can spend about 45 seconds, that's all it takes, to kind of take all of my tension from writing and write something on social media. And then I'll revisit it in 15 minutes, and it's bubbling all over the place. So you hate me, this person wants me kicked out of the art world, Roberta jumps in and says something, and I don't feel isolated anymore. And I also think, frankly, we're talking about print media. Roberta said we are very lucky to have these last 20 jobs left in the United States. And they're going to be gone, but all of you critics and writers out there, there's a huge new world out there. I think there's no crisis in criticism whatsoever. And I know you don't think so either, because you said that to me. But everybody's always hysterical all the time. More people are reading than have ever read in the history of the world, and every person in this room wrote today. I mean, that's a lot of writing most of it, 85% of what you wrote is crap. But I just think, in short, that social media is a way to flatten the playing field, to stop the old model of criticism, which was like a pyramid, where we were on top yelling at you, and you were there yelling at us. Now we can all speak and yell at one another equally.
So this is exactly
Wait,
what I...
Roberta wants
yeah,
to
go,
say
go.
something, I
No,
think.
I think we have a different point of view. I just wanted to say that, you really, in the jobs we have, you really do have to talk about life before and life after social media. Because I think, Twitter is sort of the greatest antidepressant for writers. It's a way to be alone and do your work and also not be alone. And that's been, for me, I don't use it the way he does, but it is a way to stay in touch. I also just wanted to say strictly autobiographically, like what he does, I just thought of this, what he does in terms of going online much more than I do by going out to galleries. And going to galleries for me is a form of, I love museums, nothing against that, but it's really kind of ecstatic. And I actually don't really care. Of course I'd like to see good art all the time, but I'm always learning something. And I think that, this again has to do with this privilege of having life in your art, having art in your life. I love the kind of unit of galleries, the way that, they're connected by streets and sidewalks that you often walk from one to the other. You see these people in them who are making these statements, putting this stuff on view for you to come see and react to. And, they're putting up all these objects and each object just needs one person to buy it. But there are all these other people that are coming in and out who get to see it and who become part of some kind of large and amorphous conversation. Go ahead.
I wanted to talk about this sort of before and after social media thing. We live in an age with a fog of opinion, which is wonderful and completely exhausting at the same time. How did this shift in the landscape register with you, each of you, with your writing? How quick or slow or skeptical or excited were you to embrace new channels of communication? What were the full starts along the way? And do you see, Jerry, for example, you seem to me, I'm very new to Twitter, I'm very passive, I've never tweeted, but I read. Is your social media, you're looking at me very scornfully, is your social media persona an extension of your print writing, or do you see it as something completely different? So I'm curious about how you got into it and sort of where you are within, how it fits into the jigsaw of your general sort of activity.
These are great questions. I luckily never even had time to ask myself this. But I do know that I wanted to speak to as many people as openly and vulnerably and as honestly as I could possibly do it. And I wanted the art world, because I'm much older, to be more like the way phone conversations. If any of you ever used a telephone, the old kind? Well, we used to have long phone conversations, and you would break up with friends over they liked this show, and then the next day you'd be friends again. But I've always thought that's what I want. I want people, look at people. We in the art world need to dance naked in public. Most people are dancing naked in private. So yes, I need to be looked at while I'm writing. And I want people to look at my writing and to have an opinion, and I'm not afraid. I think we all have to learn to just grow up a little and not be afraid, because you will write like I do all week and think you write something awesome. And the first comment, somebody will go, yawn. And at home, I read your comment. I don't let you know this, but I think, ow, that hurt. But Roberta taught me something interesting. She taught me that there's a grain of truth in every criticism. And so anybody that says anything to me, I'll believe. Now, Roberta's a little different. She doesn't have thick skin like this.
I mean, Jerry should just say that one day somebody came up to him and said, you should be on Twitter, and I'm going to set, it started with Facebook. You should be on Facebook, and I'm going to set this up. And all of a sudden, he just had a Facebook page, and all these people were friending him almost before he started it.
And then by accident, I wrote, I don't like the work of Marlene Dumas. That's all I said. And 1 minute later, my ass was on fire. But go ahead.
So he went first, and he went really head first. And then Twitter came along, and then I gradually I wasn't going to have anything to do with it. I think I'm much different.
And the excitement is the immediacy and the rapid fireness of it and the real-timeness of it, or it's the breadth of audience that you're reaching, or both of these things?
Well, I think we use it differently. You know, I really use it in a kind of personal way. And the great thing about Twitter is I think of myself as a working critic. I'm not a theoretical or philosophical critic. I am a working critic. And as such, my mind is kind of going all the time, but on a kind of, pedestrian level. But I see Twitter as a place to put odd thoughts that I have about art. Like you're in front of a painting and you have a thought. There's a chance that you might use it in a review, but there's also a chance that it's just extraneous, but it's kind of interesting. So and I think he uses it in a more polemical way or something. So I'm like, I don't take Twitter seriously, but I'm interested in having contact with like-minded people. And there are amazing minds on Twitter that I wouldn't otherwise know. People who are in the art world, but like in Washington or...
And I was going to say, you write for a newspaper which since 3 or 4 years has existed behind a paywall, an online paywall. Yeah. So Twitter also enables you somehow to jump over that paywall.
Right, and at the times you're very much encouraged to be involved with social media.
I was just going to say, how are your employers?
They love it.
They do.
And, I have to figure out, I would never post a picture of a show I was going to review. I didn't want to give anything away, and now it's like, okay, you can do that. You just you have all these restrictions that change. The whole thing keeps changing. And now I just got on Instagram, and I'm you can write reviews on Instagram because you have unlimited. So that changes. I mean, I used to always say, I know I want to review a show because when I walk into the gallery, my mind starts writing a review. Well, now you can actually literally do that with Instagram. I can it's strange because you can completely bypass the New York Times. I can just, which is great for me because I'm always there's so many shows out there that aren't getting reviewed that it just kind of, makes me frantic.
I also think that we don't even have to talk about these things called Instagram, Twitter, Facebook is already just, well, never mind. These 3 platforms, forget the delivery system. The delivery system is going to change. It used to be one way. It would be pamphlets written by Baudelaire. Now, for a little short while, it's been these things that we used to call Jerry Saltz, a super critic. Some guy asked me, no, it used to be newspapers. There's a young artist that asked, could he make a superhero out of me? I said, yes. He said, do you want to make a lot of money on it? And I said, no, take it. And now he's really rich. That's the other point. That I think I tell you, I think copyright is dead. Completely dead. My magazine always says, no, don't give permission. And I always say, I already gave it. My work is in the public. Words are materials. Other people use materials. Painters, your paintings are material. Other people can use them. I bet painters are very conservative about this. If somebody uses a picture of your painting in their painting, they get hysterical. And I always say, take anything you want from me, anything, for free. I'm going to be poor no matter what. And I think that makes criticism dangerous and great. We don't have anything to lose, I'm afraid. We have nothing to lose because we're never going to make a lot of money. If I posted my bank statement, and I don't want to say it out loud, as a real exercise to see how far can we go. And I promise you, this is not a wealthy life, though I had one of the best days of my whole life today, being in this museum more or less alone, courtesy Sabina and Jasper.
The copyright issue is really interesting also for museums. We were speaking on Saturday about the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, which has just launched all of its collection and images into the public domain. They've written off, I think, around 280,000 euros a year that their income from copyright to allow anyone to use their images on T-shirts, fridge magnets, social media, everything. And they say it's been such a success that they would estimate it would cost them 2 million euros to buy the publicity that they have gained from doing that. So it's an interesting thing. I want to move on to another subject. And we have a little cartoon from your friend Pablo Helguera in New York. I don't know who this is. I don't think this is YouTube, but she's wearing glasses though. But I want to talk a little bit about the power and relevance of the critic today. It used to be that the defining judgment on an artist's work was made by two different voices. The museum curator, who would give an artist an exhibition and who would possibly acquire an artist's work for a public collection, and the critic, who would express his or her view about an exhibition and influence the readership accordingly. Today, with the art market that we have at present, commercial reputations are developed long before museums give artists any sort of imprimatur curatorial approval or critics write positively about them. A prominent New York art advisor called Todd Levin recently said, "The critics are out of the game. These days it's dealers and collectors who build value, and artistic value has become conflated with price." So my question to you is, how do you perceive this shift of influence from curator and critic to collector or auction house or dealer? And within that, how do you perceive your roles as critics with regard to taste and making taste? Because value and taste are two things which are very closely linked. And is this shift a very real shift, or is this just a shift which a lot of people talk about but is not so real?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I always mispronounce the name because I can't remember. But whatever it was Barnett Newman said about birds, remember that?
Ornithology? Whatever, go on.
I don't think I know what Barnett Newman...
Criticism is to artists as ornithology is to the birds, or art history is to artists. Well, I feel a little bit that way. I feel like we're in the trenches and we're doing this thing. To give a short answer just to do a kind of scattershot answer, I can remember going to shows in the 1980s and being amazed, young artists' first shows, and being amazed that they were already sold out. So I feel like I'm not surprised by that. At that point, it was the art advisors who were running everything. I think that any kind of power is earned. It's not that you take power, it's that you are given power, or people who give you credibility. So there are certain people that read me for whom I have power. There are certain people who don't. There are certain people for whom Larry Gagosian has power. I mean, the art world is a huge fight right now, and everybody has a position, everybody has an argument, and you make it in different forms. Some people make it in the way they spend their money. Curators make it in the way the shows they put on view. I make it in what I write about. We all have some of the same audience. None of us has all of that audience. So if you want to think about about value in art and who has a career and who has really high prices right now, then I guess Todd Levin is right. I don't know. I don't know if people will read a review of mine or of Jerry's and call up the dealer and say, I want to buy that. I have no idea and I don't care. It has nothing to do with what I see as the integrity of my work, and it doesn't have much to do with the people that read me seriously, I don't think. But maybe I'm being idealistic. I just think that it's, all of this is just going on all the time. It's in motion all the time. Money is in motion, opinions are in motion. Artist status and their so-called rankings, all of that is always in motion. And there are these moments of fixedness. Some of them are auctions, some of them are reviews. And all of it's anything that we decide isn't going to stick. It's all going to get rethought by subsequent generations. And half of what we took seriously will be forgotten. Just if you go to any museum and you go into the vaults and you just see what you've never heard of, or you go into the back of an art magazine, say look at Arts Magazine, 1958, go to the back and look at the reviews. See how many artists, names you've heard of. You just get this sense of, it goes on all the time. And what happens is that certain things float to the top, and enough people are moved by this or that. They're moved by somebody's art. They're moved by somebody's writing. Certain things get saved and held, and people go back to it again and again. And you can't really, I don't know, I can't worry about it. I've got too many shows I want to see. There's too many artists I want to write about. And I don't really care, Some people will read me, a lot of people won't.
And I would only add to Todd Levin, who said critics aren't in the game, I would just say, I know the game we're in. And the other thing I would say is we have got to keep in mind, people, that about 1% of 1% of 1% of 1% of all artists make any money. All of you want the money that Jeff is making. Bob Monk has it here. No, sorry, he's from Gagosian. No, but I would say this. I love him, and the people at Sotheby's and Gagosian and the Kunsthistorisches and a kid that calls herself an anarchist, they all love art the same way. Larry Gagosian actually loves art the way you love it. I know you're thinking, yeah, well, he's getting more out of it, and you're damn right. But that's what he's in it for. So yes, the market is here. Of course, we're all aware of it, and it makes us sleepy and depressed, and we want that money. And if you're a male of a certain age and probably white, you've got, like I said, that 0.99999% of laying your hands on a little bit of money.
I'm going to ask one more question about the market, because we promised not to talk about this for too long. This is a painting by Damien Hirst, which was made in 2008. It's a triptych. He first showed it at the Wallace Collection in London in 2009. It was absolutely hammered by every art critic, this whole body of work, as just the most talentless, awful art. And everything sold before opening night for millions and millions and millions of dollars. This is a painting which was first publicly shown last week in New York. It's a brand new painting by Jeff Koons. It is a painting from the Kunsthistorisches Museum collection, which has been one-to-one copied by Bartholomäus Sprenger, with a little shelf and a glass gazing ball. This has had an incredible pushback within the 5 days that it's been shown, a lot of sort of lampooning messages on Twitter and so on, and I'm sure will sell out immediately if it hasn't done already. This is a painting by a young artist who was actually educated here in Vienna called Christian Rosa, who's now gone on to great things in the West Coast and on the East Coast of the United States. And my question to you about these various different artists at different stages of their careers is, I have the feeling that there is a generation of very established artists now who are almost bulletproof to criticism. As if, take Jeff's triptych, it's shown all of the voices that count, and I know that sounds like an awfully elitist thing, but the 20 voices that you mention, not because there's any conspiracy, they just all line up and rail against this work, and I don't know that the voices have the effect they may have once had. This is really an extension of the last question I asked you. And also, involved in that, what is your responsibility with a generation like this? And Jerry, you spent a lot of time writing and talking about this particular generation of artists. What is your role as a critic in kind of slamming on the brakes with the very dizzying ascent of the younger generation that's following them?
I really don't know what to say. I so admire you, Jasper. But when I look at Damien Hirst is a great guy. He de-Englandized England. England is basically the capital of England, okay? I'm sorry, English people. I love you, okay? Jeff is like Ronald Reagan, and he makes some great work. So what if these two things stink, and it's okay with me that 20 people who matter, I don't even know what that means, because it doesn't mean anything. Art Review 100 says all their advertisers matter. That is brilliant. I think that is so smart. Look at their top 10. It's the top 10 ads in their magazine. I would do that if you wanted me to, love you. I don't know what we're talking about when we're talking about the market. And this has nothing to do with you, Jasper.
No, but
we're not talking about art, and it's making us all insane right now, right?
But if I can take this question a step further, it will
make us insane. I'm telling you.
I don't think it will, but I'm just curious. A critic reviewing an exhibition here in Vienna is in some ways identical to a critic reviewing a show in New York, and yet there's also a difference, which is there's this sort of red-hot market in New York. I'm just saying, can you? You're answering my question. Can you? But can you, when you look at? I'm just curious because I find it difficult as a curator going into a gallery or a museum show and blocking out a certain noise and not registering a detrimental reaction because of noise. There is an earnest question at the bottom of this. The noise of...
I'm just going to have a hysterical fit. I want Roberta to answer.
My feeling is that it's ever thus in some ways. There's always going to be a certain kind of noise. There's always going to be a confusion of value and money. Money has, and I know that I feel like, well, I'm like trying to get out of this. I don't want to answer this. Like, there's a way, I just, my job is to look in as clear a way as I can. I understand that. I just take that as part of the challenge. Like, yes, there's this noise here. What we get into are these incredible kind of horrible power plays. Like, and I find that many of the players are male. That there are all these people who hate everything that Jeff Koons does. That's their position. And there's a lot of weight that gets thrown around, and it's all a power play. People want to sort of build their opinions on bad-mouthing Jeff's work, that you don't look at anything. He's implicitly bad because he makes so much money. Well, that's not the case. He's a very uneven artist, and he actually tries to do something different. He doesn't want to repeat himself. He tries to keep on kind of pushing at something, and some of it's horrible, some of it's good.
All right, ask another.
Yeah. Jerry, I
failed at that.
No, you were great. I just didn't.
Yeah. No, let's move on. I'm as much as you're visiting galleries, one thing that New York is known for is its extraordinary institutions. And I'm curious, we have a wonderful exhibition on now at the Kunsthalle, which explores populism in art, and they'll be doing a symposium in January about populism in art museums, in galleries, and so on. to what extent do you see your roles as critics in not just writing a wonderful review of the new Frank Stella show, but to what extent are you encouraged by the people you write for to profile institutions in a broader sense, or to write pieces which are holding them to account? I mean, Jerry, you've been extremely forthright in your views about what's happened to MoMA in the last years. You had Tom Krenz before that. And it's a very interesting discussion. We see a bit of it in Vienna, where an article might address, but it's normally in a review of a specific show, and then there's a sort of bit which is tacked on about the institution's bigger picture. Because these are some of the texts that both of you have written that I've most enjoyed, where you've taken the meat and drink of what the institution should be serving up and addressed that. I'm curious about the role you see for yourselves as critics in terms of holding the feet of institutions to the fire a little bit.
Well, I think it's something he's done better than I have. I mean, one of the things that you do as a newspaper writer is that you're constantly you're haunted by the pieces you're not writing that you think you should be writing, and I feel that writing about museums is a big responsibility, and sort of writing about the larger picture. But you have to have a certain opportunity, but I think that that's a huge responsibility to sort of like, right now, what is it about MoMA? All of their shows are credible and really seriously done, but all of their contemporary art shows, actually, if you think about them, they really look alike. That's something that I think, and that, needs to be said. And it will be said, but I don't know, it's just, I feel like we're failing you.
Not at all. I'm just curious, is this a particular type of writing that you also enjoy? Is the sort of institutional criticism?
We've just lived through a period of really bad museum architecture. Okay? You're in a museum with a bunch of rooms. Why do you architects in this room hate rooms? You have to build big atriums. Yes, even the emperor had to build an atrium. But I don't even know why we let architects build museums anymore. I think they don't understand space for art. And that's all Roberta has written about MoMA. And really, that's all I have. But I'm in more of hysterics.
It's more complicated than that. I think museums, we're at this point where two things have happened. Like, the interest in art is so great and so diverse. You have all these different levels of sophistication and of involvement. And art itself is completely diversified. Like, it used to be sort of black and white, in theory at least. I don't think it ever really was. But now there are all these gradations. And there's art, and there are things that have degrees of art. There's, it seems to me like the entire landscape between what we used to call high and low is totally full. And to kind of cover that and account for all the different audiences that acquires, like, this isn't design, this isn't, say, there's certain kinds of political art that I think have gradations of art. And institutions themselves are just going through so much. They're going so crazy right now. There's so many ways to admire their anguish. There's so many ways to criticize it. That.
What sort of dialogue then develops when you write about an institution? Because you have, what's the echo from the institution itself?
Well,
does an interesting dialogue?
No, you don't really have a dialogue. I mean, you talk to people off the record and you get reactions. But I'm not, I don't want to sit down with somebody, with a museum person, and say, well, this is what I think you should do. I'm not going to give, that's not part of the ethical code of the New York Times. You don't give advice to your subjects. You don't have, that gets back to your other question of interaction. But the advice you give, you have to give in print. And you do get reactions,
Dirty looks. And I've talked to critics in museums that are hating on the show or hating on the museum. And then I say, wow, I can't wait to read you, man. And they always look at me and go, well, I can't write that. And I go, why? What on earth are you talking about? Then what are you going to do? Oh, well, then I won't write about it at all. Many critics claim their magazines or publications do not allow negative reviews. I have never written for or heard an editor say that. In my entire life of writing from the bottom of the food chain all the way up to the high middle where I am. Honestly, honestly. So that is bullshit. Critics, writers, historians, curators, museum directors, you don't lose anything by saying this, unless, like Roberta says, you lose your credibility by saying it too much or hysterically. Sometimes that can happen.
Do you suffer from regrets as a critic? Something that you've praised, which you later sort of didn't, or something that you've been a little harsh on, which you've then later come round to? And do you try and address regrets publicly?
I don't think so. I mean, I think what happens is that you have all these, your opinions are, sometimes they're very emphatic, and sometimes they're not fully formed, and your writing reflects that. I'm not saying it's bad not to have a clear opinion, but opinion is a complicated thing. So sometimes you're softer, you kind of leave more space, but you're also sort of waiting. The work develops and your opinions develop. So,
given that
but I don't really think no, I didn't hate this and then find out that I loved it. I might.
And is there ever a space between your quite immediate social media responses to something and then it sort of stewing with you for a couple of days before you pen?
It's really complicated because sometimes your immediate reaction is the reaction you're going to write, but writing is a process of discovery. So then sometimes you go completely off. But I think that being in print as often as I am, I don't know, it's a life, there's like this continual kind of remorse that you didn't write about this show or you didn't get that opinion as clear as you would like it. And it's this kind of...
But that's always going to exist
kind of
because of the terrible deadlines you're on.
You're having it's like this itchiness you feel all the time. And that's, I feel like people probably in any walk of life, but that you all find the job that kind of fits your neurosis. If you're lucky, you find a job that really dovetails with what it is you need and your strengths and weaknesses. And mine is that I am a procrastinator, so a deadline is a really good thing. An editor, nothing gets me writing like an editor screaming at me on the phone, It's just, or the idea of it. And that I want this kind of immediacy, and then this kind of regret about it and its insufficiency becomes this incredible goad. And it just keeps you going to the next week and the next week, like, okay, this is a chance to make it really good. This is a chance to get better at this. And I don't know, I don't know if other people who have a weekly deadline are that way. You have this, I'm on this really short cycle. Like if I had to write a book or even a magazine article practically, it was just like,
not happening.
I'd grind to a halt. If I had to work on an exhibition for 4 years or whatever, like the idea of not having the kind of immediate gratification of performing live, as he says, of being in print. And I don't know, it's a very imperfect activity whose flaws you are painfully aware of. Occasionally you write something that just seems really intact and to hold up. And then you go on but I just think it's a kind of metaphor for anybody, any kind of job, maybe.
I'd just like to talk about this building for a little bit, where we're sitting today. You work primarily within the field of modern and contemporary art. You come from a country that has really dominated the cultural landscape for the last X many years, having been having not figured so prominently in the previous 6,000 years that we have at least represented in institutions like this. Jerry, you tweet quite a lot of historical images. How do you use institutions like this, whether it's the Met or the Frick? You spent most of Saturday here, you spend a lot of today here. How does this help you? How does this fuel you?
Like all of you here, we all know that all art is contemporary art, and that the museum is a wormhole to sort of your Garden of Eden, a place where you commune with the ancestors of everything that's come before, where the Venus of Willendorf across the way there shoots out sparks of power, where cave paintings were the first image storage systems. How can I get information stored that's in my head, outside of my head, on a hard drive? So I don't just tell you. The singers and the poets were content for the first 50,000 years just humming and singing before they wrote it down. But painters and sculptors, they're insane. So right away, they didn't just scrape in the mud. They found pigment to mix with spit and poop and like the wings of beetles 50,000 years ago, and they painted mammals greater than they have ever been painted in the history of the world. And I think that's happening all the time. You just don't quite know where, and that's how we use museums. We go to the Met together. That's what we do on Saturday nights. We're very boring, very happy, but that's what we do. We go to the Met and spend 4 or 5 hours there because we don't travel much. Yeah.
And the sort of context of art history provides a useful...
We're not trained, so we should just say that up front.
I have no degrees. Does Roberta?
Well, I didn't go to graduate school, so part of what drives you in a kind of journalistic job is also that you're just teaching yourself, and that every show, everything is an opportunity to learn something new, and you just start working. I don't know. Everything contributes to it. Like looking at everything is part of my job, because I think that. Art, looking at art is an exercise in being critical that everybody performs. You just are more or less conscious of it. Like you have opinions all the time about everything that's happening to you, including a big lot of aesthetic opinions about pleasure and about your experience. And all the people in the art world do is figure out a way to do that and survive financially. And so we get these highly developed kind of lopsided specialties and sensibilities. Like I can talk about an object and what makes an object work for me really well by now. I'm not good on psychology, I'm not that interested in narrative, but in terms of what makes something work as a form, I can talk about that. And when I talk about that, I'm demonstrating a kind of criticality for people to then, I'm repeating myself, but to sharpen their own criticality. And I think that art is a place where you practice how to be in the world. You learn about other people other than yourself. You learn about other places. Museums, for me, are big machines for practicing tolerance, for kind of becoming conscious of your prejudices and your lack of empathy with things outside yourself. And they're humbling. You learn that you're not the only one in the world. You're not the only one who's ever existed. People like you are not the only people who have ever existed. And there's nothing more important than knowing that in the world right now. And art is this very particular place to practice that. And that's the importance of art, one of the importances of art right now.
And I would only like to add that these two museums, to us, are one museum. to us, when we saw that museum across the way, you see life recapitulating itself over and over and over, and always finding a way, and how diversity that Roberta is talking about is what makes life, flexibility and diversity. And in the art world, we have to be very careful, because we get nervous and tend toward monocultures. Have you seen all the sort of monochrome painting that people show these days? You make a gray one, this one makes black, that one specializes in red. To me, you're getting dangerously close to what to call when you strip mine, you take all the nutrients out of the soil, and it will never grow again. I mean, monochrome is forever, but so that's what these two museums tell me. Diversity. You see Tintoretto coming in going, I gotta make a living here in Venice, and I gotta figure out a new way to paint fast, because otherwise I am out of damn luck. And you see him going, oh, look at this, and I'll do one of these. And the Doge goes, nice, I like it, that. And he makes 1,000 of them, you know.
Throw it open.
I'm going to ask you one last question. Joseph Cornell is an artist that both of you are much more familiar with than anybody in this room. He was relatively new for an Austrian audience. Without sharpening your criticality too much, can you impart a few words about Cornell that may be of interest to people here? This is called putting you on the spot in front of 300 people. Putting me on the spot in front of 300 people.
No, when I look at, what Jerry says about how all art is contemporary, Cornell is this great poet and this radical artist, and he's one of these, at this point in time, we have this whole obsession with recycling. And here's somebody who's already deciding, like, he doesn't have to invent images, that enough images exist and enough objects exist, and he just has to kind of edit in this incredibly poetic, precise way. He's just going to find these things and juxtapose them. He's barely gluing things together. He's just sort of boxing them. And he does prove, that all culture, he's interested in all of it, and it's all, well, that's on the wall, right? Somebody said, what's your favorite period in art history?
If someone asked him, who do you think are the greatest artists of your time? And he said, what do you mean by my time? Because he just saw it as a continuum somehow.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe, I don't know how he looks from Europe. If he looks like an American artist. He looks outside of American art in a certain way. That's what's so refreshing about him.
I would just very quickly say, it is miraculous and is fantastic that this, one of the greatest museums on the planet of the earth, has found a way to have a contemporary curator. And the city will see art here. Whether you like the younger, newer work that he shows or not, it is an extraordinary thing to have this new blood coming in and not being afraid. And for me, every show here is a new miracle because of this lucky thing. A lot of older museums either try to get too hip and they want to be brand new art galleries, which is so tragic. Hello, MoMA, this happens to you. I love you, MoMA. But this museum, please, every artist will come here. I missed Cornell, and I love that you helped return him to me. And that means a lot to me, and I'll be able to think about this man's obsession. Your obsessions, every artist in here, this is an obsessed person. You are Cornell, whether you know it or not. You're working alone in your apartment. Nobody even knows you're there. So I'm sorry you won't have enough money. That's the way life is. I'm sorry you're not going to have enough love. That's the way life is. I'm sorry. I wish you could have money and love. But if you can have time, you're a huge success. If you have time to work, to do your dumb art, to make crappy poems, just do it. And Roberta doesn't like when I tell people to stop being babies. So how should I put it?
Any way you want.
Any way I want. Don't be a big baby about it. I hate working as much as you do.
I think we're going to throw I've gone on one slide too early.
Yeah.
We're going to throw this open to the audience. We're probably going to take 2 questions. If anybody has a question, there's a microphone. We'll take 3 questions.
So I enjoyed your article about zombie art very much.
Where are you?
Here.
Straight through, right at the back of the room.
Stand up, okay. So I enjoyed your article about zombie art very much and this tendency toward monoculture. And I was wondering whether you could elaborate on this phenomenon and what you think is the reason for this.
Are you an artist?
Yes.
Okay. Do you make what I would call zombie paintings?
No.
Okay. You've got a good start, but you're never going to make money now.
I know that.
Look, real simple. Roberta has used the expression a lot. I have used it. It's terrible shorthand, and it just means a kind of academic, formal painting with just like zombie formalism. I'm trying to define zombie formalism. Anyway, a lot of art is now looking like a lot like the way a lot of art already looks like. Do you follow me? And if I'm seeing too much of somebody else's work in your work, you are a zombie. You are dead and you do not know it, but you cannot even die. And one of your friends has to come up to you and go, I believe that when your work reminds me of somebody else, that if it's been done before, and I really mean this truthfully, every artist, if it's been done before, then do it again. I really mean that. Do it 100 times, do it 10,000 times, and then call up your friend and go, am I still making Cy Twombly's? And if your friend loves you, they'll go, yeah, you're dead and you don't know it. I see dead people. Okay, that's it. And Roberta, any thoughts?
We'll have another question.
It'll go away. The worst of it is just going to disappear.
When the
Don't
money
worry about
goes, it will go. What?
it. Don't worry about it. I mean,
Don't worry about it.
that
Another.
Gone. It's already gone. It'll have big museum shows. Don't worry.
It'll
It will
still go
annoy you.
away.
What?
it'll still go away.
It'll go away either way, and it's right. It's a market thing for the moment. Let those people buy those paintings. Let them buy the Jeff. Let them buy the Damien. It's like a big Death Star. They're breaking away. That will give us life in the swamp.
I don't actually want any more questions after that one, but let's have. I like the idea of life in the swamp. Maybe we just stop it at life in the swamp. I just want to say a few short words about the next things that are happening here at the museum in terms of our modern and contemporary art program. We have a wonderful gentleman coming from Istanbul on December 15th. This is our birthday present to Joseph Cornell, whose birthday is at the end of the year. Orhan Pamuk is a Nobel Prize-winning author, and he is a huge fan of Joseph Cornell, and he'll be coming to do a conversation with Philip Blom here on this stage on December 15th, and you are all most welcome to come. A little preview to next year. Next year, the Kunsthistorisches Museum will be ablaze with fireworks all year long because we are celebrating our 125th birthday. And for our 5 modern contemporary talks next year, we've invited the directors of these 5 extraordinary museums which also all came of age in the 19th century as we did. The Rijksmuseum, the National Gallery in London, the Uffizi in Florence, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and the Städel in Frankfurt. And the 5 directors of these institutions will come one at a time, January, March, May, October, September, November, and talk to us about the history of their institutions, where they stand today, and where they're heading over the next 50 or 100 years. So it will hopefully be also very interesting for us as a museum to be hearing from these wonderful directors. Before we go tonight, I wanted also just to convey on behalf of all of the staff of the Kunsthistorisches Museum our utter horror for what has gone on in Paris on Friday night. The Louvre was closed for the last 2 days. They reopened their doors at lunchtime today. And on behalf of us, I mean, that's all we talked about when we met on Saturday for the first hour. You know, what are we going to sit up on stage and talk about? And then we realized that actually, you know, what we do and the world that all of us are interested in is the best possible remedy for this kind of thing. So on behalf of the museum here, we're sending all good wishes to colleagues in all the museums in Paris that have just reopened their doors. The Joseph Cornell exhibition will be open for an hour now for anyone that hasn't seen it and would like to see it. I have to say a number of thank yous. The Verein der Freunde of the Kunsthistorisches Museum have helped put together this program of talks. Wien Tourismus have been very helpful in making this talk happen. Dom Perignon, our sponsors for the talks program this year. The Hotel Sans Souci, where Jerry and Roberta have relaxed and live tweeted from over the last couple of days. Vienna Art Week, our partners for this conversation, they have an enormous roster of talks and exhibitions and things to keep you busy all week long. And the wonderful contemporary patrons of the Kunsthistorisches Museum, who are our bedfellows for all modern and contemporary things that we do. Thank you all very much for coming, and most of all, thank you to Roberta and Jerry.